Envase Technologies creates a suite of solutions that makes it easier to run your trucking business. For drivers and carriers, our solutions put control back in your hands with a TMS, capacity and storage marketplace, and rate management system. Optimize your operations with less administrative headaches and increase the value of your time spent on and off the clock. Envase Technologies, driving progress, delivering innovation. For more information, visit envasetechnologies.com. That's ENVASE Technologies.com.
Hey, supply chainers, wherever you are in the world, this is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon from wherever you are joining us. My name is Dyci Sfregola, and I am going to be sitting in for Sarah Barnes-Humphrey today as we go through this episode of Thoughts and Coffee. If you don't know me, I am a digital supply chain advisor for ethical and sustainable data-driven supply chains. Are you ready to find your community? This is a word from our sponsor. If you are struggling to find a supply chain community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts in supply chain, professional development, and marketing, look no further. We created the Secret Society of Supply Chain to provide a safe space, a community for everyone in supply chain. We offer unique opportunities for everyone to connect and grow in 3 distinct value-packed communities: the supply chainers, women in supply chain, and the creative room. From the learn at your own pace, content-rich approach of the supply chainers to the empowering community-focused space, women in supply chain, and the marketing mastermind of the creative room, we mean it when we say there's truly a place for everyone. So head over to secretsocietyofsupplychain.com to explore which community was made for you. So this episode is produced by Let's Talk Supply Chain, brought to you by the Secret Society of Supply Chain. Head over to the website, get some information, and sign up for one of the communities. So what do we have going on at Let's Talk Supply Chain this week? Jam-packed week. As always, episode of the week, it's episode 403, Unify Your Retail Experience with Delivery Solutions. Make sure you head over to letstalksupplychain.com and catch the latest episode of the week. Blended news. The newest Blended episode is out, and we will drop the link for you in the comments for that. And everyone can find Blended Podcast now on blendedpage.org. The latest episode, I'll be there for you, The Real Cost of Allyship. In other Blended news, we have also opened nominations for volunteers and committee chairs for the Blended Pledge. If anyone is interested, please submit nominations. They close on May 10th. We need volunteers, and the nomination form is going to be dropped into the comments as well. So if you're interested in volunteering or nominating someone, head over to that link and make sure you get that done before May 10th. And then we also have a new Women in Supply Chain blog with our very own Abby. And we are going to be talking about how supply chain is a force for positive change. So recap, episode 403 of Let's Talk Supply Chain, episode of the week, Blended Pledge, volunteer sign up, and then make sure you check out Women in Supply Chain blog, and that is going to be all linked into the comments. So without further ado, let's bring up our guest for this week, Mr. Eric Johnson.
Hey, Dyci, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
Good. It feels weird to be on this side of the screen instead of the side that you're on.
I'm so glad that that's you and not me.
Well, let's see. Let's wait till the end and make sure I live up to lofty expectations. I'm usually seeing Sarah and Audrey in these seats, so
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about yourself, Eric. I know you, all the regulars know you, but for anyone that doesn't know you and doesn't know about the Journal of Commerce, give us a little insight.
Sure. So I am, my day job is the senior technology editor at the Journal of Commerce, which is a publication that focuses on supply chain, specifically transportation and logistics. So we like to, or I like to say, we cover when goods become freight, and then when they stop being freight and turn back to goods. That's kind of when that's the world we report on and live in. So that's joc.com, where you can find all the articles that we post. I also do a show twice a month on this Let's Talk Supply Chain Network, for those of you who don't know, first and third Fridays of every month, talking about technology, which is what I cover 99% of the time.
Okay, so what Friday are we in? Do you have a show this week?
I don't. This is the second Friday. I had one last Friday and I have one next Friday. But
okay,
yeah, I'm at a conference that we're putting on about break bulk and project cargo this Friday. So
that was going to be my next question. JOC does a couple of conferences throughout the year as well. It's not just the journalism aspect of it and articles.
Correct. Yeah, we don't think of ourselves as an events company. The events that we put on, and we put on three main ones. TPM is probably the biggest one that everybody knows about. That's in March. We put on a conference in fall called Inland Distribution, or Inland 24 this year, that focuses on North American surface transportation. And then this week we do one every April in New Orleans that covers the break bulk and project cargo space. So yeah, they're fun. It's great to actually meet the industry instead of doing Zoom calls all day. So
yeah, absolutely. It's always good for some in real life action.
Definitely.
Okay. All righty, we have our weekly poll. Let's pull up the results from that and see what we have going on. I'm going to pull it up on my side because I can't read those little words. Looking at them. All right, so we want to hear from you. This was the question. How does your company handle global customs and compliance? So we still have 1 day left to vote. This poll is sponsored by Wise Tech Global, so we appreciate them for that. And then, how does your company handle global customs and compliance? I imagine that, Eric, you talk to a lot of companies about customs and compliance. What do you think is going to be the leader for this?
Ooh, yeah, I suspect that this will be as someone who used to put together surveys around the trade compliance kind of function, I suspect you're going to get a very sort of diverse set of opinions here. I don't think there's going to be one like dominant winner out of these choices. And I say that because every company has a different sort of philosophy on how they handle customs. Sometimes it's because they're very purposeful in how they set up the customs compliance function. Sometimes it's just it's the way that the company has evolved, and it's the way that they've invested in systems or the customs brokers that they rely upon. So I don't think you're going to get a universal or a unanimous kind of selection here. Mm-hmm. Obviously, how decentralized you are and how is going to depend a lot on kind of the complexity of your global supply chain. So if you're primarily out of one source into one market, that's a totally different sort of centralization view than if you are like a big FMCG company and you're going literally from everywhere to everywhere, right? So you probably have to think a little bit more decentralized in how you handle the blocking and tackling of trade compliance in that latter scenario.
Okay, I like the global strategy, local action, and don't we call that glocalization? Did I make that up? Have I heard of that before?
I think that is
okay.
I don't know. I've never heard it applied to trade compliance, but why not? Yeah. Yeah. No,
I just like blanket term,
Yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty, cool. So we have 3 articles that we are going to go through, and we are going to provide our opinions and thoughts around these articles. And I have my points here in my little notepad. So let's bring up our first article. I loved this article. I really, really, really liked this article, and I had a couple of takeaways. We as supply chain professionals are resilient and we get things done. Where there is a will, there's a way. Supply chains make the world go round. And I really like how this underscored the importance for me of like your network design and visually understanding where your supply chain really sits in order to, continue to be able to be resilient in risk management and risk mitigation and find ways around things, which is what they talked a lot about in this article.
Yep. So yeah, this was an article that I thought not just summarized the issue of what happened in Baltimore last month, but was it last month already? Yeah, I think it was last month, right?
Was it?
Or was it early April?
It was this month. It had to be this month.
This month, yeah. But also just sort of the wave of things that supply chains have been dealing with since the pandemic started. We write at JOC, we take a somewhat sober kind of view of things and recognizing that, news is news, right? When things happen, when a bridge collapses, obviously that's news. You report on it. But we're reporting primarily for the benefit of people who have to take a very calm perspective on things, because in global supply chains, things break every single day. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's small things that break. Sometimes it's things that break very particular to your supply chain. Sometimes it's affecting a bunch of people. In this case, it's affecting a lot of the population of shippers. Something like what's happened in the Red Sea since last December, that's impacting almost every single shipper in some way, right? But the question is not, is the thing that happened the most important thing to focus on, or is your reaction and your ability to react the most important thing? Mm-hmm. And I think what this article did a good job of highlighting is everybody in supply chain is focused on, okay, something came up. How do we get the stuff that needs to get from point A to point B? How do we get it there? Not, oh, well, guess we're not going to get our stuff in today, so let's just go golfing. Or
no one says, oh, well, didn't make it. It's all hands on deck, figuring out how to keep the world moving, making sure that people get the stuff they need to be able to live. If you are still working through this, if you have worked through this, we would love to hear in the comments what you lived through, how your team managed it. Was it firefighting? Was it kind of a day in the life of a supply chainer? Because the other thing that I liked about this article is that it really pointed out, to your point, sobering, like this, let's just talk about the facts and get past the sensationalization of supply chain disruptions, which I feel like has been very much a headline, almost clickbait since COVID, because supply chains have always been disrupted. That's what supply chainers do, is manage disruptions. Nothing just goes the way that you want it to go.
There's so many times I remember reading in the middle of the pandemic, and then even now, kind of like postmortems on it. It's like, remember when we ran out of this, or when things didn't happen? And maybe my recollection is faulty, but I'm focusing on the 99.9% of things that were executed despite all the challenges. I'm not focused on the 0.1% that, an empty shelf for a couple days that eventually got filled, right? And so that's, I think what you're sort of alluding to is the dichotomy. So that the mainstream media, which I used to be a part of and I have a huge amount of respect for, they have focused on supply chain since the pandemic because it caught so much attention. But their stories are always going to be about the thing that's unusual. Their story is not going to be about the thing that says, oh, well, these people, these professionals were able to get stuff into stores, into factories, into distribution centers, despite all the challenges, because that's not as interesting to a reader who doesn't have the context for supply chain. What's interesting is, how is this going to not allow me to get the thing that I depend on. Whereas we're writing to an audience that is just doing all of that stuff. And we're always going to focus on, all right, is there something that's like literally broken that you cannot get around? Like the Suez, right? That is something you can't pass through the Suez Canal right now without a lot of risk. So what happened? You just go around Africa. Seems kind of crazy, but it's now normal. That is the new normal now, right? And no one is in our world is really talking about it all that much other than figuring out what it means in terms of time and cost, right? So that's I think the challenge as you read about what's going on in supply chain is there's two very different outlooks. And so that's why I thought this was interesting to point out.
I think this was also the article where it mentioned political, I don't want to call it strife because it's not always necessarily political strife, but you do want to be aware of, political things, because it was this article because it was China and Taiwan in the context of, this article. But I know I have a client, and since the end of last year, she was saying, guys, we need to be aware of safety stock. We need to be aware of costs. We need to be thinking of things because we don't know. It's an election year. We don't know what tariffs will do. We don't know how, our our importing will change. So it was something that she was already putting in the minds of people to be tracking and be aware of what is happening, even within the US, politically, where we both sit,
That
you're in DC, so
I'm in DC.
You have all the inside knowledge.
I try to stay away from the fray, the political fray, because you can get too sweat. That's its own industrial complex here, but it's a good point, and so I agree. I think there's actually like more shippers than we even realize are very focused on the potential for more tariffs post-election, no matter who's elected. But I would classify things like China, Taiwan, the potential for some sort of, invasion or war, whatever you want to describe it, and how that impacts supply chains, as well as potential tariffs that might result from the election. I would quantify those in known potential threats. A ship crashing into the, Baltimore's key bridge, both name and bridge was to use the cliche, not on anyone's bingo card, this month. So you have to do your best, as you do the best you possibly can to plan for the things that could potentially happen and build capacity to prepare for the things that you have no idea that they're going to happen. Right. I mean, COVID obviously fell into that bucket. Like no one was thinking.
And that is a great segue into the next article, because I have a comment around that is about AI.
Okay.
So I personally have been working with a new tool, which I really, really like. And one of the things that made me think about AI is because I know in my world, just personally, I spend a lot of time in my Google alerts, and there are certain alerts that happen, or there are certain alerts that I put in, and I want to, just kind of track them to see how the situation is unfolding, to see how long it will affect my role and what I'm doing. But one of the benefits of AI and your network design is that, to your point, you don't know, like I don't know to make a Google alert for something that hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the Google alert? Like, tell me if there's a supply chain disruption in Vietnam because my third tier supplier is there. Like, how do you even do that? So leveraging AI now, if you tell it these things, there's different tools out there where you can start to track, and it really helps us do our jobs better. So going into that for this article, will AI take my job? ? Maybe. I mean, I have so many points about this article.
We could have done 30 minutes just on this.
Yes, just on this article, maybe even like a full hour. So maybe we start it here, and then it is technology and it is digital, and then maybe it finishes on your show at some point.
Yeah. Sure.
But there are a couple of things that I do want to just quickly go through. So my takeaway was always be learning. because the world has always evolved and will continue to evolve and change. There were a couple of quotes that I took from it. Technological change is inevitable. These changes can chew up a generation of workers, but productivity improves. And for the most part, people's lives also improve as a result of these changes. So I think that really set the context for the entire article, because it talks about the jobs that are being created. There's even a graph that shows all of the jobs that will be created as a result of AI. So yeah, maybe AI will take your job, but a new job will be created as a result. So back to always be learning. But there was also a point, and I kind of called it the productivity conundrum. People are not machines. And there's research that suggests that we are actually declining as people in productivity, potentially as a result of all the different technology that we're using in our attention span between Slack and SharePoint, and where does this thing sit and where does that thing sit, and it takes us forever to find things. So I just really thought that this article was a great overview that took things from a couple of different perspectives. And while it did have the statistics of, AI will take this job, AI will probably affect this percentage of jobs, and those percentages are high, it wasn't the typical fear mongering for me of like, oh, AI is going to take all the jobs. It was a very objective perspective of, but these are the facts.
So when I read this, I thought back to, I used to do, what's it called? The Substack every week on logistics tech. And a couple years ago, I did one about automation changing the nature of the logistics workforce, like inevitable. And I tried to do it in the same way as this author did in this piece.
And everyone hated you.
Well, no, because I wish it was read by enough people for people to hate me. But I tried to write it from the perspective of like, if you accept that every single technological revolution changes the nature of the work that humans do, then you'd be left with no other outcome than, yes, of course, if we introduce a new type of technology that does the same work that humans do, sometimes better, sometimes usually faster, then you have to accept that, yes, the nature of work will change within a specific industry, and then obviously globally. So, to me, yes, I totally agree. The onus right now is on people like in their 30s, 40s, 50s who still have 30, 40 years left in their career to always be learning, as you said, because you're gonna have to figure out how you coexist with the job that you want to do and you're accustomed to doing, alongside things that may be doing parts of your job a lot better. Mm-hmm. People in their teens and 20s in 10 years' time will be better equipped to understand what those new roles are, because we'll have had 10 years of AI being slowly introduced, and they'll just know what to aim at
anyway.
Yeah,
they'll be doing something new by that time.
I mean, it's just kids these days are so insanely intuitive with stuff that takes us forever to sort of navigate. Mm-hmm. That will permeate, and then when they're 30 and 40, they will struggle with the exact same thing that we are struggling with now. So, to me, the one thing I would caution is I don't think this wave of AI is going to overtake jobs in an immediate. It's not going to be in 2 years, everything has changed.
I wouldn't even say it'll be 5 years. Yeah. It's not even 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we have time, and if you're not curious and you're not learning about how to use, whether it's generative AI or more complicated, less sort of user-friendly versions of AI, you're probably putting yourself in a little bit of peril. Not necessarily definitely in peril, but probably in peril. The hard part with AI is it's sort of, and I write about this a lot, especially for people who are supposed to buy software for their companies or make decisions on what software to use. It's marketed as a product like apple juice.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's not. It's a
Yeah.
tool that technology developers use alongside a bunch of other tools to make a product or a solution better, right? So a lot of like understanding what AI is beyond what most of us can even comprehend. We comprehend the part where we can interact with it, like ChatGPT.
But there's so much on the back end.
And every single software company is using it. So it's like you can't, it's not like, oh, well, I hope AI is replacing things today, yesterday, tomorrow, for sure.
Right.
So
yeah. Absolutely. And speaking of replacing things, this article also has a dashboard where you can go and you can look and see, based off of this research, what business functions they anticipate that will affect AI. Personally, for me, it was a lot of the stuff that most people don't like doing anyway. So that it's great to see that we now will be able to use human resources to level up and do not the just grunt work, redundant tasks that we can have technology do. Going into our last article, for me, and this is very specific to modular manufacturers. Construction is my world, so I always like to put in a little blurb for the construction industry. We don't have enough supply chain professionals. We don't have enough digital supply chain enthusiasts in the industry. So there is a lot of cool stuff going on, but we will not make it unless we get more people that understand supply chain. So I always like to do a little blurb of what's going on. And this was specifically about vertical integration versus horizontal integration. And I know we don't have a lot of time to really talk about it because we are winding down. 30 minutes goes by so fast. But there are pros and cons to both. It's, basically Henry Ford versus today. Do we do it all? Or do we outsource? We also recently saw, I don't know if you read the Boeing article, about how they haven't done a great job at outsourcing. So they've lost a lot of control. They lost a lot of visibility in exchange for what was short-term, kind of short-sightedness. Quite frankly, in my mind, also greed from a profit perspective. So if you're thinking about vertical versus horizontal integration, that is a strategic supply chain governance thing. That's not something that is only to be considered at the tactical or operational level. 30-second, 45-second thoughts on this article, Eric?
Well, so I will leave the manufacturing side of this expertise to you because that's totally your domain. I've never really covered the manufacturing side of the world. So vertical, obviously I'm aware of the pros and cons of vertical versus horizontal, but or more outsourced model. But I think there's you can apply it to the world that I report on, logistics, where you've seen
3PL, 4PL.
Yeah, you've seen companies like Maersk and Amazon essentially create like this vertical integration of services.
Shane and Temu also, I've been seeing a lot of people talking about their new supply chain as a service.
Absolutely. So my view has always been in logistics that outsourcing puts in the hands of a particular part of the process, puts it in the hands of the people who are best suited to do that. So a 3PL is usually better at selling logistic services than the actual physical carrier. A software provider is usually better at building and maintaining and updating software for the 3PL than the 3PL is itself, right? So you have that chain of kind of outsourcing key pieces of the business, but there are obviously anomalies. There are companies that are exceptional at vertically integrating, but it's very difficult.
Yes, and that's what the article is, the trade-offs, pros and cons. All righty, so what do we have coming up this week? And then we will let everyone go. So we have Risk and Reward, Winning in Supply Chain. That's going to be on the 25th. And then we have several in-person events that are coming up. So we have Coupa Inspire this week happening right now. Third annual supply chain symposium is next week. Home Delivery World is going to be in June. And then we get into June, going into the fall with some other events, which is where I think you can probably see Sarah Barnes Humphrey at all of these.
I'll be at Home Delivery World with her.
Cool. Yeah. And see the Let's Talk Supply Chain team, as well as other supply chain professionals. Thanks everyone for tuning in this week for Thoughts and Coffee, and we will see you next